My name is Margaret. I'm 66 years old, and my own daughter accidentally sent me a voice message that was meant for her husband. What I heard about myself in that audio made me leave the very next morning with a plan she would never see coming. Ricardo, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. I heard my daughter Grace's voice with a coldness that froze my blood. She's a nuisance. She gets into everything, and on top of that, we're already spending so much money on her. I've been looking into some cheap places. I found one that only costs $800 a month. In that moment, I felt as if the floor had opened up beneath my feet. This was the same daughter for whom I had worked day and night cleaning other people's houses, the same one for whom I paid for college by selling even my jewelry, the same one who cried in my arms when Richard left her at the altar the first time, and I spent my last savings to convince him to come back. But the audio continued, and what came next was even worse. Also, I've already checked the house papers. It's in her name, but I found a way to transfer it to our name without her realizing. My cousin Carol, who works at the county clerk's office, is going to help me. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. My own daughter was planning to steal my house, the only thing of value I had in this world, the house I built brick by brick with the sweat of my hands, working 12 hours a day for 30 years. But what hurt the most was hearing her laugh at the end of the message. In a month, Mom will be in the home, and we'll own everything. We can finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us. If you have ever felt the most profound betrayal from someone you love, you'll know exactly what I felt at that moment. But what my daughter Grace didn't know is that her mother isn't as naive as she thinks, and after 66 years in this world, I've learned that sometimes the only way to defend yourself is with the same cunning that's used against you. I couldn't sleep a minute that night. At dawn, I got up with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I put on my most elegant crimson suit, gathered all my important documents, and left the house with a smile on my lips and a plan that would change everything forever. To understand why what I heard hurt so much, I need to tell you how I became the woman I am today and how my relationship with Grace became the most important thing in my life. I grew up in a family where love was measured by the sacrifices you made for others. My mother, may she rest in peace, worked as a seamstress from 5 in the morning until 10 at night to support me and my 3 siblings. We never had much money, but we always had love, respect, and strong values. Margaret, my mother would say to me while teaching me to sew, in this life, the only thing that matters is family, and for family, you give everything, to the last drop of blood. When I got pregnant with Grace at 18, her father disappeared as if by magic. One night he was there, promising we were going to get married, and the next morning, he was gone. His parents slammed the door in my face when I went to look for him, telling me their son wasn't going to ruin his future for some random girl. That's when my mother showed me what she was made of. That child is going to have everything we couldn't, she told me, hugging me and drying my tears. We'll raise her together so she can be a good woman. My mother sold her only 2 gold bracelets, the only jewelry she had, to buy me everything I needed for the baby. When Grace was born, it was as if an angel had been born. She was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen, with her big eyes and a smile that lit up the whole room. My mother and I took turns caring for her while I worked. I started cleaning houses at 19, earning barely $20 a day, but every cent I earned was for her. I vividly remember the first day I took Grace to kindergarten. We walked because we didn't have money for the bus, but she wore her uniform perfectly ironed and her shoes shined. The other mothers arrived in fancy cars, dressed in expensive clothes, and I felt small in my patched-up dress and with my calloused hands. But when Grace kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thank you, Mom, you're the best in the world," I knew it was all worth it. The years passed, and my routine was always the same. Wake up at 4 in the morning, prepare breakfast for Grace, take her to school, work cleaning 3 different houses until 6 in the evening, pick her up, help her with homework, and put her to bed with a story. On weekends, I did laundry to earn extra money, also she could have a better life than mine. My mother passed away when Grace was 8, but before she left, she made me a promise I will never forget. Margaret, that child is your greatest treasure. Give her an education, give her love, and she will take care of you when you're old. Our family's blood is good. She won't fail you." Those words gave me the strength to keep going, even when the days were so hard that I wanted to give up. When Grace turned 15, I worked extra days for 6 months to give her the party she deserved. I spent $3,500 on that celebration, money I had been saving to fix our leaky roof. But seeing the look on her face that night, watching her shine in her golden dress as she danced, was priceless. "Mom, I don't know how you give me so much when you have almost nothing," she told me that night while hugging me. "When I grow up, I'm going to give all this back to you, multiplied by 1,000. Throughout high school, Grace was an exemplary student. She had the best grades in her class, participated in school plays, and all the teachers told me she had a brilliant future ahead of her. But keeping up with those studies wasn't cheap. Books, uniforms, field trips, it all cost money I didn't have. I started cleaning a fourth house on Sundays, my only day off, just to be able to pay for it all. When it was time to enroll her in college, the cost was $15,000 a year. I was only earning $400 a month cleaning houses. I did the math, and it was impossible, but a mother does the impossible for her children. I took out a loan using my house as collateral. I sold the only engagement ring her father had given me before he left, and I even sold my mother's sewing machine. "My daughter," I told Grace the day I took her to enroll, "I couldn't go to college, but you are going to be a professional. You'll have a degree. You'll work in an office with air conditioning, and you'll never have to clean other people's houses like your mother." That day, I cried with happiness, watching my daughter sign the enrollment papers for her business administration degree. For all 4 years of college, I continued to work like crazy to pay for all her expenses. Grace needed money for books, for projects, to go out with her friends, for appropriate clothes for presentations. I gave her everything, even if it meant I had to eat beans and tortillas for a whole week to save money. When she graduated, it was the proudest day of my life. Seeing my daughter walk onto the stage in her cap and gown, hearing them call her name, and the ovation from the crowd was as if all my sacrifices had been worth it. After the ceremony, she hugged me, crying, and said, "Mom, this is as much yours as it is mine. I would never have made it here without you. I promise you that now that I'm a professional, you will never have to suffer again." A year later, Grace met Richard at her job. At first, I was so happy because I saw her so content and in love. Richard seemed like a good guy. He had a stable job as a supervisor at a factory, and he treated my daughter well. When he officially asked for her hand, I cried with emotion, thinking that Grace would finally have the stable family I could never give her. But organizing the wedding was another huge financial sacrifice. Grace wanted an elegant celebration like the ones in magazines. She said the venue cost $8,000, the dress $2,000, the music $800, the flowers $600. In total, I spent $10,000 on that wedding, money I got by taking out another loan and selling the last of my remaining jewelry. The first years of their marriage were beautiful. Grace and Richard would come to visit me every Sunday, we would have dinner together, and she always helped me with the house expenses. "Mom, now that I'm working, I want to take care of you the way you took care of me," she would say while giving me money for groceries. I finally felt that my sacrifices had paid off, that I had a grateful daughter who truly loved me. But everything changed 3 years ago when Richard lost his job and they started having financial problems. They began to constantly ask me for money, and as always, I couldn't say no. First, it was $1,000 for monthly expenses, then $2,500 for a down payment on a new car, then $3,000 to pay off credit card debts. Everything began to change subtly after I lent them that $3,000 for their debts. At first, there were small details that I justified in my mind, thinking they were a result of the stress from their financial problems. But now, after hearing that message, I understand it wasn't stress. It was the beginning of a calculated plan to push me out of their lives. The first sign was when they stopped coming on Sundays. "Mom, we're so busy with Richard's new job," Grace would tell me on the phone. "You know how it is. We need to show we're responsible." I understood, or at least I thought I did. After all, it was natural for a young couple to want to focus on getting ahead. But then the excuses for not answering my calls started. I would call in the mornings and Grace would say, "Mom, I'm in an important meeting. I'll call you later." I'd call in the afternoons. "Oh, Mom, I'm at the grocery store doing our weekly shopping." At night, "Mom, it's too late. We're having dinner. We'll talk tomorrow." That tomorrow never came. And when we finally did talk, the conversation barely lasted 5 minutes. Then came the hurtful comments disguised as concern. "Mom, Richard says he's noticed you've been very forgetful lately," she told me one day during one of our rare phone calls. "Are you sure you can live alone in that big house? At your age, anything could happen." I laughed nervously, thinking they were exaggerating, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. One afternoon, I decided to visit them without warning, bringing them the pineapple dessert that Richard loved so much. When I knocked on the door, I heard laughter and voices inside, but it took them almost 5 minutes to open it. "Oh, Mom, what a surprise!" Grace said with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We were just organizing some work papers." Inside was her cousin Carol, the one who worked at the county clerk's office, with a bunch of documents scattered on the kitchen table. When they saw me come in, Carol quickly gathered all the papers and stuffed them into a folder. "Hello, Aunt Margaret," she greeted me with that fake smile she had always had. "I was just helping Grace with some of Richard's health insurance paperwork." But I managed to catch a glimpse of my name on one of those documents before Carol hid it. "Why do you need papers with my name on them?" I asked with genuine curiosity. Grace and Carol exchanged a look that I didn't know how to interpret at the time, but which I now understand perfectly. "It's just to update the beneficiaries on the insurance, Mom," Grace told me. "You know, in case something happens to us, you're our only family." That explanation calmed me down at the time, but later I started to notice that whenever I mentioned the subject, Grace would quickly change the conversation. "Mom, why don't you tell me about the garden?" she would say. "Oh, Mom, did you see the new show that's on Channel 5? It was then that the deliberate forgetfulness started. They would invite me to lunch, and when I arrived at the restaurant, they weren't there. "Oh, Mom, we forgot to tell you we had to cancel," they would say later. "Richard had a work emergency." This happened 3 times in 2 months. The 4th time it happened, I was left sitting alone in that restaurant for an hour, feeling like a fool, while other families all around me enjoyed their meals together. They also started excluding me from important family events. I found out by chance, talking to my neighbor Miss Rose, that they had had a barbecue to celebrate Richard's birthday. "How strange you weren't there, Margaret," Ms. Rose told me. "I saw them buying meat for like 20 people at the supermarket." When I asked Grace why I hadn't been invited, she said, "Oh, Mom, it was a very informal thing. We didn't want to bother you." But the straw that broke the camel's back was when they decided to move into my house temporarily. "Mom, they're going to paint our apartment, and we need to stay with you for about a month," Grace told me. "Besides, this way we can spend more time together. Don't you think it's perfect?" I was happy to have them close again. I thought we would finally regain the closeness we had lost. However, from the very first day they arrived, things became different in my own house. Richard started complaining about everything. That my TV was too old, that the internet was too slow, that the shower didn't have enough water pressure. "Aunt, this house needs a lot of repairs," he would say. "At your age, maintaining such a big property must be very difficult." Grace started reorganizing my things without asking. "Mom, these plates are too old. I'm going to replace them with new ones," she would say. "And these clothes you have in the closet are so out of style. We should just donate them." Little by little, my house stopped feeling like my house. It was as if I were a guest in my own home. Then the quiet conversation started, which would stop when I walked into the room. I would see them talking in the kitchen, and when I appeared, they would immediately change the topic to something trivial, like the weather or the news. "What were you talking about?" I would ask them. "Nothing important, Mom," Grace would reply. "Just about the house expenses." One night, I heard Richard talking on the phone on the patio. "Yeah, we're already living here." "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. Carol says she can have all the papers ready in 2 more weeks." When I went out to ask him who he was talking to, he said it was his boss about a work project. They also started subtly controlling my finances. "Mom, let me help you with the electric and water bills," Grace would say. "You're too old to be worrying about these things." At first I thought it was a kind gesture, but then I realized she was going through all my bank statements. "Mom, why do you need so much cash?" she would ask me when she saw I had withdrawn $200 from my personal expenses. The most painful thing was seeing how they talked about me when they thought I wasn't listening. One afternoon, I was trimming the plants in the garden when I heard Richard tell someone on the phone, "My mother-in-law is getting harder to handle. She's becoming very stubborn with age." Grace laughed in the background and added, "It's true, lately she forgets things and gets very difficult when we try to help her." But what really made me open my eyes was when they started making comments about my mental health in front of other people. My friend of many years, Ms. Letitia, came to visit, and Grace told her, "Oh, Letitia, my mom has been so confused lately. Yesterday she wanted to go for a walk at 10 at night because she thought it was morning." That was a complete lie. I had never done such a thing, but I saw how Letitia looked at me with pity and concern. "Oh, Margaret, it's a good thing you have Grace to take care of you," she said. In that moment, I felt a deep anger, but also an immense sadness, realizing that my own daughter was creating a false narrative about my mental state. Strange visitors started arriving at my house. Doctors who were supposedly there to check my blood pressure, social workers who wanted to evaluate my living conditions, and even a man who introduced himself as a geriatric care specialist. They all came when Grace scheduled them, but they never asked me if I wanted those visits. During one of those evaluations, I heard the doctor talking with Grace in the living room. "Ma'am, your mother seems to be physically fine, but I'm going to note in the report that she shows signs of mild age-related confusion." I was listening from the kitchen, completely lucid and aware, while this man wrote lies about my mental state. The tension in the house became unbearable. Every day I felt more pressure, more control over my life, more hurtful comments disguised as care. "Mom, you shouldn't drive anymore," Richard told me one day. "At your age, it's too dangerous." "Mom, it's better if you don't go shopping alone anymore," Grace added. "We can do it for you." Little by little, they were taking away my independence, my autonomy, my dignity. And the most painful part was that they did it with a smile on their faces, telling me that it was all for my own good, that they loved me so much and only wanted to take care of me. The moment that changed everything forever came that Tuesday afternoon, when my world fell apart with a simple technological error that revealed the cruelest truth I had experienced in my 66 years. That day had been particularly difficult. Grace and Richard had left early, saying they were going to take care of some work matters, but I knew something was wrong. I had seen them talking in whispers all morning, and when I asked what was going on, they responded with those fake smiles I had already learned to recognize. "It's nothing, Mom," Grace would say, "just boring stuff about Richard's job." I was left alone in the house, feeling that pressure in my chest that had been growing for the past few weeks. The house that used to be my refuge now felt like a prison. Everything had changed since they had come to stay temporarily. My routines, my spaces, even my way of living had been altered to accommodate their needs and their secret plans. Around 3 in the afternoon, I was making chamomile tea to calm my nerves when I heard the notification sound on my phone. It was a voice message from Grace. At first, I thought she was letting me know they would be late or maybe asking me to prepare something special for dinner. How naive I was to think my daughter still considered me important enough to tell me her plans. I pressed the play button without imagining that in the next 3 minutes, my entire life would be torn to pieces. "Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore." Grace's voice began with a tone of exasperation she had never used with me in person. My heart stopped. Those words, spoken with such contempt, were like sharp daggers piercing my soul. This was not the sweet daughter who would hug me and say, "I love you, Mom," every time she left. She's a total nuisance, Richard. She gets into everything we do, always asking questions, always there, and on top of that, we're already spending so much money on her. I've been looking into some cheap places. I found one on the outskirts that only costs $800 a month. With what we save, we can finally remodel the kitchen we want so badly and even get new furniture for the living room. Every word was like a physical blow. My own daughter, the child to whom I had dedicated my entire life, was talking about me as if I were a piece of old furniture that needed to be discarded. The $800 the home would cost was exactly what I had been giving them every month for their personal expenses, money that came from my pension and my small savings. But the audio continued, and what came next completely destroyed me. Also, I've already checked all the house papers. It's in her name, but Carol already explained how we can transfer it to our name without her realizing. It's going to be about $500 in bribes and fees, but it's worth it. My cousin already has experience with these kinds of arrangements. In that moment, I understood everything. Carol's casual visits with her folders full of documents, the conversations that stopped when I appeared, the specialists who had come to evaluate my house and my mental state, it had all been part of a meticulously orchestrated plan to have me declared incompetent and steal my property. My house, the house I had built brick by brick, working 12 hours a day for 30 years. The house where I had raised Grace, where we had celebrated her birthdays, where I had cried when she graduated from college, where I had dreamed that one day my grandchildren would play. That house, which was worth approximately $485,000 and represented all my assets, all my future, all my security. I already spoke with the director of the St. Francis home, Grace's voice continued, with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. I explained the situation. I told him that my mother has early-stage dementia and that it's dangerous for her to live alone. He was very understanding. He says they see cases like this all the time. I've already signed all the preliminary admission papers. My legs trembled so much I had to sit on the kitchen floor. My own daughter had lied to a stranger about my mental state. She had signed papers to have me institutionalized without my consent, and she was doing it with the same ease with which one plans a vacation. "The plan is perfect, honey," she went on, talking to Richard. "Next Tuesday, we're going to tell her she has a routine medical appointment. We'll take her to the home, check her in, and by the time she realizes what happened, she'll already be inside, and we'll have legal guardianship. Carol says that with the medical reports we got, which say she has mental confusion, it will be very easy to prove she can't make decisions on her own. Those fake medical reports they had fabricated with the help of corrupt doctors, those evaluations I had allowed, thinking they were for my health. It had all been a farce to build a file that would justify taking away my freedom and my rights." Richard could be heard in the background, laughing and adding comments that I couldn't understand clearly, but his tone of approval was evident. The man I had welcomed into my family, whom I had helped financially, whom I had treated like a son, was actively participating in the plan to destroy my life. "The best part of all," Grace continued with a laugh that broke my heart, "is that she'll never suspect a thing. She thinks we're the perfect children who adore her. She still says, 'Thank you for taking care of me, honey,' when I bring her breakfast in bed. If she only knew that I'm giving her that breakfast to keep her calm while I prepare her funeral in life." In that moment, something inside me broke irreparably. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the pain of discovering that my daughter hated me. It was the humiliation of realizing that while I blessed her every night in my prayers, thanking God for giving me such a good daughter, she was calculating how many days were left until she could get rid of me. With the $485,000 the house is worth, we can pay off all our credit card debts, the car loan, and we'll even have enough left over to go to Europe on vacation like we've always wanted, Grace continued. And the best part is we won't have to pretend to love her anymore. No more Sundays pretending we like her horrible food. No more listening to her repetitive stories from when she was young. Every word was another stab. My food, which I prepared with so much love every Sunday, hoping they would come to visit. My stories, which I told because I wanted to share the beautiful memories of my youth with them. and teach them about our family. Everything I thought was love and connection was for them a nuisance they had to endure. In a month, Mom will be in the home, and we'll own everything, Grace finished saying. We can finally live in peace without that bitter old woman controlling us. Besides, the life insurance she has is in our name, so if something happens to her at the home, God forgive me for saying this, it wouldn't be so bad. Those last words froze my blood. Not only did they want to steal my house and my freedom, but they had coldly calculated that my death would also be convenient for them. They had turned their own mother into an investment, hoping to gain profits from both my life and my death. The message ended with laughter and comments about what restaurant to choose for dinner that night, as if they had just planned a vacation instead of the total destruction of the life of the woman who had loved them more than anything in the world. I stayed seated on my kitchen floor for I don't know how long, with the phone still in my hand, replaying the message over and over, hoping I had heard wrong, hoping it was a nightmare I was going to wake up from. But every time I listened, the reality became more raw, more painful, more definitive. That night, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do anything but walk around my house, looking at every object, every photograph, every memory I had built, thinking that one day I would lovingly pass it on to my daughter. Now I knew that all of it was going to be stolen, sold, or thrown in the trash without any respect for the memories it represented. But as I walked through my house in the dark of that morning, something began to change inside me. The sadness and pain started to transform into something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, cold determination. My daughter thought I was a naive old woman who was easy to manipulate, but she had completely underestimated the woman who had raised her. At dawn, I got up with a mental clarity I hadn't had in months. I put on my most elegant crimson suit, the one I kept for special occasions. I grabbed my purse with all my important documents and left the house before Grace and Richard woke up. I had a plan, and they had no idea what was coming. That morning, I woke up at exactly 5 o'clock as if my body knew it was the most important day of my life. All night long, I had been planning every move, every word, every detail of what I was going to do. I was no longer the naive Margaret who had allowed her own daughter to manipulate her for months. Today, I was going to show Grace that she had completely underestimated the woman who had raised her. I put on my crimson pantsuit, the same one I had worn to her college graduation. I put on my makeup carefully, styled my hair elegantly, and put on the pearl earrings my mother had left me. I wanted to look like the strong, dignified woman I was, not the vulnerable victim they thought I was. Before I left, I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen table. Left early to take care of some personal matters. Will be back in the afternoon. Love, Mom. I didn't give them any more details because they didn't deserve them. For months, they had made decisions about my life without consulting me. Now it was my turn to act without giving them an explanation. My first stop was the bank. I arrived exactly when they opened, at 8 in the morning. "Good morning, Ms. Baker," said Nora, the manager who had known me for 15 years. "How can we help you today?" "Nora, I need to review all the transactions in my account for the last 6 months, and I want to change all my beneficiaries," I told her with a firmness that surprised her. "I also need you to explain to me if anyone has tried to access information about my accounts without my authorization." Nora frowned as she reviewed my file on the computer. "Miss Baker, I have several inquiries about your account registered here made by your daughter Grace. She presented a letter signed by you, authorizing her to review your bank statements to help you with your finances." My blood boiled. "Nora, I never signed that letter. Can you show me that document?" When I saw the supposed authorization, I immediately recognized that the signature had been forged. It was similar to mine, but I had never written my name with that slant. "This is a forgery," I told her, showing her my ID so she could compare the signatures. "My daughter has been fraudulently accessing my bank information. I need you to immediately cancel any authorization she has and put a security alert on my account." Nora turned pale as she realized the seriousness of the situation. "Ms. Baker, this is very serious. We are going to cancel all unauthorized access immediately, and I recommend that you file a fraud report." "That's exactly what I'm going to do," I replied. "But first, I need to protect my assets. I want to transfer all my funds to a new account that only I can manage, and I want to change the beneficiary of my life insurance." For the next hour, Nora helped me secure all my finances. I transferred my $8,750 in savings to a completely new account. I changed all the passwords and named a charitable foundation for abandoned seniors as the beneficiary of my life insurance. Grace was no longer going to see a single cent of my money. My second stop was the county clerk's office, where Carol, Grace's accomplice cousin, worked. I arrived without warning, with a small recorder hidden in my purse. "Good morning, Carol," I said with a sweet smile. "I've come to check the status of my property. My daughter told me you had been helping her with some paperwork." Carol immediately became nervous. "Oh, Aunt Margaret, what are you doing here? Grace didn't tell me you were coming." Her hands trembled as she tried to quickly close some documents she had on her desk. "Don't worry, Carol," I said, maintaining my casual tone. "I just want to better understand this insurance paperwork my daughter is doing. Could you explain exactly what documents you need with my name on them?" Carol started to sweat. "Well, Aunt, it's just routine updates for the registry." Her voice cracked when she realized I knew more than I was letting on. "Carol," I said, leaning forward, "I know exactly what you and my daughter have been planning. I know about the fake documents. I know about the plan to take my house, and I know you've been helping her forge papers using your position here." I showed her my phone with the audio I had recorded the day before. "I have proof of everything." Carol slumped in her chair. "Aunt Margaret, I didn't want to do it, but Grace told me that you couldn't take care of yourself anymore, that it was for your own good." "It was for money, Carol. Don't pretend it was for my own good," I told her firmly. "Now you have two options. Either you help me reverse everything you've done, or I go straight to your boss and show them the evidence that you've been forging official documents." Carol started to cry. "Please, Aunt, I can't lose my job. I have 3 kids to support." Between tears, she explained the entire process to me, how they had forged my signature on several documents, how they had created fake medical reports, and how they planned to use all that to have me declared incompetent and transfer my property. "All right, Carol," I said after she had confessed everything. "You're going to help me fix this, and then you're going to look for another job. But if you help me now, I won't press criminal charges against you." Over the next 2 hours, Carol helped me invalidate all the fraudulent documents they had created. She also gave me copies of everything as evidence, including the fake medical reports and the property transfer documents they had prepared. My third stop was with Attorney Harrison Ford, the most respected lawyer in the city. "Attorney Ford," I said, showing him all the evidence I had collected, "I need your help to stop a fraud and protect my rights." Attorney Ford reviewed all the documents with professional attention. "Ms. Baker, this is a very serious case of family fraud. We have more than enough evidence to press criminal charges. But tell me, what exactly do you want to achieve?" "I want justice, attorney," I replied. "But most of all, I want my daughter to learn that actions have consequences. For 66 years, I have been too good, too generous, too understanding. It's time for someone to defend me, even if I have to do it myself." The attorney smiled with admiration. "Ms. Baker, we are going to prepare a legal strategy that protects all your rights and sends a very clear message about the consequences of trying to defraud a senior citizen." For the next few hours, we prepared a civil lawsuit for fraud, falsification of documents, and attempted illegal appropriation. We also prepared a criminal complaint against Grace, Richard, and Carol. The attorney explained that I had a solid case and that it was very likely I would recover all the damages caused. By the end of the afternoon, I returned home feeling completely different. I was no longer the vulnerable victim who had left that morning. I was a woman who had taken full control of her life and was ready to face the consequences of years of allowing others to abuse her kindness. When I arrived, Grace and Richard were in the living room watching television, acting as if nothing had happened. "Hi, Mom," Grace said, with that fake smile that I had already learned to recognize. "How did your errands go?" "Very well, honey," I replied calmly. "I took care of exactly what I needed to." I sat in my favorite armchair and looked at them intently. "By the way, some people are coming to visit us tomorrow. I hope you're here to receive them." "What people, Mom?" Richard asked with curiosity. "Oh, you'll see," I told them with a mysterious smile. "They are people who are going to help us clarify some important things about our family's future." That night, we had dinner in silence. I knew exactly what was going to happen the next day, but they had no idea of the storm that was coming. For the first time in months, I slept soundly with the peace of mind that justice was on its way. The next day, at exactly 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, getting up quickly before Grace or Richard could move. At the door were Attorney Harrison Ford, 2 police officers, and a public notary. "Good morning, Ms. Baker," the attorney said. "We've come to execute the orders we discussed yesterday." Grace and Richard got up from the sofa with looks of complete confusion. "Mom, what's going on?" Grace asked. "Who are these people?" "Sit down," I told them with an authority they had never heard in my voice. "It's time for you to know the truth." Attorney Ford cleared his throat and began to speak. "Ms. Grace and Mr. Richard, I am here on behalf of Ms. Margaret to inform you that we have discovered irrefutable evidence of fraud, falsification of documents, and conspiracy to commit illegal appropriation against her." Grace and Richard's faces turned completely white. "What are you talking about?" Grace stammered. "We would never do anything like that." "Grace," I said, taking out my phone, "do you want me to play for everyone the voice message you accidentally sent me yesterday?" In that moment, I saw all the blood drain from my daughter's face. Her eyes filled with pure panic as she realized that her perfect plan had been discovered because of her own negligence. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. The silence in my living room was deafening. Grace and Richard were petrified, staring at me as if they had seen a ghost. For all these months, they had believed they had total control of the situation, that I was a helpless old woman they could manipulate at will. Now they realized that they had completely underestimated the woman who had raised them. "Attorney Ford," I said, keeping my voice firm and serene, "please proceed with the presentation of the evidence." The attorney opened his briefcase and took out a thick folder full of documents. "Ms. Grace and Mr. Richard, we have in our possession irrefutable evidence of the crimes you have committed against Ms. Margaret." He placed the first documents on the coffee table. "Let's start with the forgeries." He showed Grace the document she had signed at the bank, authorizing herself to access my accounts. "This is her authentic signature," he said, pointing to my ID. "And this is the forged signature that you presented at the bank." The differences were obvious when seen side by side. I don't know what you're talking about," Grace stammered, but her voice was trembling so much that it was clear she was lying. "Mom asked me to help her with her accounts because she was forgetting to pay the bills." "Grace," I said with a calm that even surprised me, "stop lying. There's no escape now." I took out my phone and pressed the play button. My own daughter's voice filled the room. "Richard, I can't take having my mother in this house anymore. She's a total nuisance. She gets into everything we do." I watched Grace's face completely fall apart as she listened to her own words. Richard tried to maintain his composure, but his hands were visibly shaking. Neither of them had realized that the message had been sent to my phone by mistake. "I've been looking into some cheap places. I found one that only costs $800 a month." "Turn that off!" Grace screamed, lunging for my phone, but one of the officers immediately stopped her. "That's private. You have no right to listen to my conversations." "Relax, honey," I told her with a cold smile. "This is just getting started. Sit down and listen to everything you planned for your mother." The audio continued to play. Carol already explained how we can transfer the house to our name without her realizing. It's going to be about $500 in bribes and fees, but it's worth it. Richard stood up abruptly. "This is a setup," he said, pointing at the attorney. "You're manipulating her to accuse us of things we didn't do." Attorney Ford smiled professionally. Mr. Richard, we haven't even gotten to the most interesting part yet. He took another document from the folder. This is the complete and signed confession of Carol Rodriguez, cousin of Ms. Grace, who works at the county clerk's office. My eyes met Grace's, and I saw her realize that Carol had betrayed her. In this confession, the attorney continued, Carol details exactly how you pressured her to forge official documents, how you created fraudulent medical reports, and how you planned to use these documents to declare her mentally incompetent. Carol is a liar! Grace screamed desperately. She made all that up to save her own skin. Oh, really, honey? I asked, taking out my small recorder. Because I also have the complete conversation I had with Carol yesterday in her office recorded. I pressed the play button, and Carol's voice, confessing everything in tears, filled the room. Grace told me that you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. She showed me how to forge your signature. She promised me she would pay me $2,000 once she had the house. Richard sank into the sofa with his hands on his head. This is a nightmare, he mumbled. Everything got out of control. No, Richard, I said firmly. This is justice. What was a nightmare was living in my own house, feeling like a prisoner, listening to you talk about me as if I were a nuisance, watching you plan to steal everything I've worked for in my life. Attorney Ford continued with the presentation of evidence. We also have the fraudulent medical reports that you commissioned. He showed the documents where corrupt doctors had written that I had senile dementia and was incapable of making decisions for myself. Ms. Margaret voluntarily underwent a full psychological evaluation yesterday, conducted by Dr. Raymond Morales, a geriatric specialist at the General Hospital. He pulled out the official report. The results show that Ms. Margaret is in perfect mental condition, with a clarity and reasoning ability superior to the average for her age. This proves that all the previous reports were fabricated. Grace started to cry, but they weren't tears of repentance, but of desperation at seeing her plan completely fall apart. Mom, please, she pleaded with me. We just wanted to take care of you. We thought it would be better for you to be in a place where they would attend to you professionally. Take care of me? I asked with a bitter laugh. By stealing my house, lying about my mental health, planning to institutionalize me against my will? I stood up and walked toward her. Honey, in that message, you also said you hoped I would die soon so you could collect my life insurance. I never said that, Grace screamed. I replayed that specific part of the audio. Besides, the life insurance she has is in our name, so if something happens to her at the home, God forgive me for saying this, it wouldn't be so bad. The silence that followed was devastating. Even the police officers exchanged looks of disgust upon hearing a daughter talk about her mother's death as a financial opportunity. But there's more, the attorney said, taking out another folder. We also discovered that for the last 6 months, Ms. Grace has been withdrawing money from her mother's accounts without authorization using fraudulently obtained information. He showed the bank statements where withdrawals ranging from $500 to $1,500 were seen, all made by Grace. In total, they have stolen $8,750 from Miss Margaret's accounts. That money was for house expenses, Richard protested. We were paying for food and utilities. That's a lie, I replied. I was still paying all my house bills with my pension. That money you stole was for your personal whims. I saw you buying expensive clothes, going to fancy restaurants, while you told me we had to save because times were tough. The attorney continued to expose every detail of their criminal plan. We also have evidence that you contacted the director of the St. Francis home and paid a $1,200 registration fee to secure a spot for Ms. Margaret, all without her knowledge or consent. He showed the payment receipt and the admission documents they had signed behind my back. You planned to take her this coming Tuesday, telling her it was a routine medical appointment. It was for your own good, Mom, Grace insisted desperately. You were getting so forgetful, sometimes you got confused. Enough with the lies, I finally exploded, losing the composure I had maintained throughout the confrontation. I have never been confused. You invented those stories to justify your plan. I still manage my own finances. cook my own food, take care of my own house, and even help you financially when you ask me." I addressed Grace directly, looking her in the eyes. "You know what hurts the most, honey? It's not that you wanted to steal my house. It's not that you planned to institutionalize me against my will. What hurts the most is that for all these months, while I hugged you and told you how much I loved you, you were calculating how much money you were going to make from my death." Grace completely broke down and began to cry hysterically. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. We were desperate for money. We had so many debts. We didn't know what to do." "Desperation doesn't justify betrayal," I told her firmly. "If you needed money, you could have asked me honestly. My entire life, I have given you everything I have. But instead of trusting my love, you decided to steal from me and destroy me." The police officer approached with handcuffs in his hand. "Ms. Baker, do you wish to proceed with the arrests?" I looked at my daughter, who was crying inconsolably, and for a moment I felt a pang of maternal pain. But then I remembered her words in the audio, her coldness in planning my destruction, her laughter when talking about my death. "Yes, officer," I replied in a firm voice. "Proceed with the arrests." Seeing my own daughter being handcuffed in my living room was one of the most painful images I had experienced in my 66 years of life. But it was also the moment I realized I had regained my dignity and my personal power after months of feeling like a helpless victim. "Mom, please," Grace yelled at me as the officer led her toward the door. "You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter. I'm the only thing you have in this world." Her words echoed in my mind with a bitter irony. She had been the one who decided I had no place in her world. Richard, on the other hand, looked at me with a pure hatred that chilled my blood. "This isn't over, you crazy old lady," he whispered as he passed by me. "You're going to pay for ruining our lives." Those words didn't scare me, but they confirmed that I had made the right decision by exposing them. After Grace and Richard were taken away, my house was left in an absolute silence I hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since they had come to stay temporarily, I could walk around my own house without feeling like I was being watched, judged, or manipulated. But that peace didn't last long. The next day, a campaign of terror began that showed me the lengths Grace and Richard were willing to go to get revenge on me. The first attack came through social media. Grace had created a fake profile and had started posting terrible stories about me in local community groups on Facebook. "My mother has senile dementia and falsely accused us of theft," she wrote. "She's so confused that she doesn't recognize her own family. Please, if you see her alone on the street, call me because she shouldn't be unsupervised." The posts included photos of me taken without my knowledge, where I appeared distracted or tired, which they had edited to make it look like I had mental health issues. The comments from strangers were devastating. "Poor woman, she looks very confused. How terrible for a mother to accuse her own children. They should seek professional help for her." Ms. Rose, my neighbor for a lifetime, came to my house worried after seeing those posts. "Margaret, honey, are you okay? I saw some really ugly things online about you and your daughter." I had to explain the whole situation to her, show her the evidence I had so she would understand that it was all a smear campaign. But the harassment escalated quickly. Phone calls started coming in at all hours of the day and night. Unknown voices insulted me, threatened me, and told me I was an unnatural mother who had destroyed her own family for money. "You're a miserable old woman," a female voice screamed at me at 3 a.m. "I hope you die alone and abandoned." People I didn't know also started showing up at my house, supposedly concerned for my well-being. Fake social workers who said they had received reports that I was in danger, aggressive salespeople who insisted on selling me security systems because a single old woman is very vulnerable, and even people who introduced themselves as distant relatives who had come to verify my mental state. Attorney Ford explained that all of this was part of a desperate legal strategy. "Ms. Baker, they're trying to create evidence that you really do have mental problems to discredit your testimony in court. It's a common tactic when the accused don't have solid legal defenses." But what hurt the most was when anonymous letters full of poison and resentment started arriving. "You're a failed mother," one of them said. "You raised a daughter who hates you so much, she'd rather see you dead. Think about what you did wrong." Another letter was even crueler. "Your own children abandoned you because you're insufferable. No one will miss you when you die." The letters attacked not only my relationship with Grace, but all the sacrifices I had made in my life. "You worked as a servant your whole life. And for what? For your daughter to despise you. You were a fool who let herself be used." Every word was calculated to shatter my self-esteem and make me doubt the decisions I had made. One night, while reading one of those particularly vicious letters, I completely broke down. I sat on my kitchen floor, the same place where I had listened to the audio that changed my life, and I cried like I hadn't cried since my mother's death. What did I do wrong? I asked myself over and over. How could I have raised a daughter who hates me so much? For the first time since this legal battle began, I considered giving up. Maybe it would be easier to drop all the charges, forgive Grace, and try to rebuild our relationship. Maybe I really had overreacted. Maybe they did love me in their own way, and I had misinterpreted their intentions. But just as I was about to call Attorney Ford to ask him to drop the lawsuit, I remembered something that completely changed my perspective. I got up from the floor and went to my room, where I kept all the most precious memories of my life in a small chest. I searched until I found what I needed, a letter my mother had written to me shortly before she died, when Grace was 8 years old. "My dearest Margaret," the letter said in my sick mother's shaky handwriting, "if you are reading this, it is because I am no longer with you, but I want you to know that I am very proud of the woman and mother you are. You raised Grace with so much love and dedication that I am sure she will be a good woman who will honor you for life." I continued reading with tears in my eyes. But if things ever get difficult, if someone tries to hurt you or take advantage of your good heart, remember that you are stronger than you think. Don't allow anyone, not even your own daughter, to trample on your dignity. True love never seeks to destroy, never seeks to steal, never seeks to humiliate. The last lines of the letter gave me the strength I needed. "Margaret, you deserve respect, you deserve genuine love, you deserve to live your final years in peace and dignity. If someone can't give you that, then they don't deserve to have you in their life, no matter how much blood you share with them." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. My mother was right. True love doesn't destroy. It doesn't steal. It doesn't plan the death of a loved one as a financial opportunity. What Grace felt for me was not love. It was economic convenience disguised as filial affection. The next day, I woke up with renewed determination. I called Attorney Ford and said, "Attorney, I want you to proceed with all the charges. I am not going to drop anything. I want this case to go all the way." "I'm glad to hear that, Ms. Baker," he replied, "because I have some important news. Grace and Richard are trying to reach an out-of-court settlement. They want to avoid a public trial at all costs." "What kind of settlement?" I asked. "They are willing to return all the money they stole, pay for damages, and commit to never contacting you again if you drop the criminal charges." I thought about that proposal carefully. On one hand, I would recover my money and get rid of their manipulations forever. On the other hand, they wouldn't face the full legal consequences of their actions. "Attorney," I finally said, "I accept the settlement, but with one additional condition. I want them to sign a full confession of everything they did, publicly admitting that I am mentally competent and that all their accusations about my mental health were false. And I want that confession to be published in the same places where they defamed me." "That's very intelligent, Ms. Baker," the attorney told me. "That will completely clear your reputation and prevent them from continuing the smear campaign." A week later, Grace and Richard signed the agreement. I recovered my $8,750 plus $15,000 more in damages. But more important than the money, I recovered my peace of mind and my dignity. The public confession was devastating for them, but liberating for me. We Grace Baker and Richard Williams, admit that we falsely accused Ms. Margaret of having mental problems. We admit that we planned to steal her property and that we created fraudulent documents to declare her incompetent. Ms. Margaret is in perfect mental condition, and we invented those stories to justify our criminal actions. That day, exactly 1 month after hearing the audio that changed my life, I realized that I had achieved something that seemed impossible. I had defeated those who tried to destroy me, and I had done it with intelligence, dignity, and by always sticking to the law. But my story wasn't over yet. I had a new life to build, and I knew exactly how I wanted to live it. With the legal agreement signed and my reputation completely restored, the time came to make the most important decisions of my new life. I was no longer the naive Margaret who had allowed her kindness to be abused for decades. I was a 66-year-old woman who had learned that true strength doesn't come from enduring abuse, but from defending yourself with intelligence and dignity. The first action I took was to completely change my will. I summoned Attorney Ford to my house and dictated my new final wishes. Attorney, I want all my assets, including this house and all my savings, to be donated to the Golden Hope Foundation, which helps senior citizens abandoned by their families. Are you completely sure about this decision, Ms. Baker? The attorney asked me. It's a considerable estate, approximately $490,000, including the house, your savings, and the compensations you received. Completely sure, I replied firmly. I want that money to help people who truly need it, not ungrateful children who see their parents as a financial investment. I also stipulated that if Grace tried to contest the will, she would automatically lose any right to receive even a penny. My second decision was to move. I no longer wanted to live in the house where I had been betrayed, where I had heard my own daughter plan my destruction. Attorney, I want to sell this property and buy something smaller, more in line with my current needs. In 3 weeks, I found the perfect place, a beautiful apartment in a residential complex for active seniors with gardens, recreation areas, and a community of people my age who valued independence and dignity. The apartment cost me $85,000, and with the $95,000 I had left from the sale, plus the legal compensations, I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But my most satisfying revenge was completely legal and absolutely devastating for Grace and Richard. It turns out that during my investigation with the attorney, we discovered that they had lied on their tax returns for the past 3 years. They had reported much lower incomes than their real ones to pay less in taxes. But at the same time, they had been living a lifestyle that didn't match those reported incomes. Ms. Baker, the attorney told me with a smile, I have information that might interest the IRS. He showed me evidence that Richard had been working unreported side jobs and that Grace had been selling products online without declaring those earnings. Attorney, as a responsible citizen, I believe it is my duty to report any tax evasion I am aware of, I told him with a smile that reached my eyes. After all, we all must contribute fairly to the country's upkeep. A week later, the IRS initiated a full audit of Richard and Grace. They discovered that they owed $22,000 in back taxes, plus penalties and interest that brought the total debt to $35,000. But since they didn't have that money available, they had to sell their car, pawn their jewelry, and take out high-interest loans to avoid going to jail for tax evasion. My third revenge was professional. During the investigation, we also discovered that Carol, the cousin who worked at the county clerk's office, hadn't been the only public employee involved in the fraud. There was an entire network of corruption that facilitated these kinds of thefts against seniors. With the help of Attorney Ford, we turned over all the information to the appropriate authorities. The investigation resulted in the dismissal of 6 public employees, including Carol, and the discovery of at least 12 similar cases to mine, where they had stolen properties from seniors using fake documents. When the scandal became public in the local newspapers, Grace and Richard became the perfect example of unnatural children who abused their elderly parents. Their names and photographs appeared on the front page with headlines like, family betrayal that shocked the city, and children planned to steal 66-year-old mother's home. But my most intelligent revenge was social. It turns out that Grace worked at a prestigious company where personal reputation was essential for professional growth. When her boss found out about the scandal through the newspapers, he called her into his office for a very uncomfortable conversation. "We cannot have employees involved in family fraud scandals," he told her. "Our company has a reputation to protect." Although he didn't fire her immediately, he demoted her to a less important position and made it very clear that she would have no opportunities for promotion in the near future. Richard also faced consequences at his job. His supervisor, upon learning that he had participated in a plan to defraud his mother-in-law, told him, "If you are capable of stealing from your own family, how do we know you won't steal from us?" He lost all opportunities to get the promotion he was hoping for, but what satisfied me the most was seeing how their own friends and family rejected them. Richard's sister refused to speak to him after finding out what they had planned to do to me. "How could you participate in something so cruel against an old woman who had only treated you with love?" she screamed at him during a family confrontation that was witnessed by several neighbors. Grace's friends also gradually abandoned her. The mothers in her social circle didn't want to associate with someone who had so cruelly betrayed her own mother. If she's capable of doing that to the woman who gave birth to her, what won't she be capable of doing to us? They would comment among themselves. Even at the supermarket and pharmacy, where they had known them for years, people would point and whisper behind their backs. They had become a public example of what not to do to elderly parents. Throughout this entire process, I never acted with hatred or a thirst for revenge. Every action I took was legal, ethical, and justified. I didn't lie about them. I didn't invent false accusations. I didn't threaten them or hurt them physically. I simply allowed the natural consequences of their own actions to run their course. 6 months after the day I heard that fateful audio, I ran into Grace at the mall. She looked haggard, tired, and much older than her 35 years. When she saw me, she approached with tears in her eyes. "Mom," she said in a broken voice, "please forgive me. I understand you're angry, but we've already paid the price. We lost everything. Our credit is ruined. Richard lost his promotion. I had to take a job with a lower salary. Don't you think that's punishment enough?" I looked her directly in the eyes, without hatred, but without weakness. "Grace, I didn't punish you. The consequences of your actions punished you. You decided to plan my destruction. I just decided to defend myself." "But we're family," she pleaded. "Blood is blood, Mom. You can't abandon your only daughter." "Blood doesn't give you the right to mistreat, steal from, or plan someone's death," I replied calmly. "For 35 years, I was your unconditional mother. For 3 months, you were my calculating executioner. You can't ask me to forget that just because you're now facing the consequences." "So you're not going to forgive me?" she asked, crying. "I already forgave you, Grace," I told her honestly. "Forgiving you was necessary for my own peace of mind, but forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or allowing you to hurt me again. Forgiving doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. Forgiving doesn't mean giving you another chance to destroy my life." I left her crying in that mall and walked away toward my new apartment, where my new life awaited me. A life where I was no longer anyone's victim, where I no longer had to pretend that abuse was love, where I no longer had to sacrifice my dignity to maintain toxic relationships. For the first time in decades, I was completely free. A year after that encounter at the mall, my life had taken a path I never imagined possible at 67 years old. I woke up that spring morning in my beautiful apartment with the sun filtering through the white curtains that I had chosen myself, without anyone telling me they were too expensive or unnecessary. I made my coffee in the small but perfect kitchen for my needs, and I sat on my balcony to contemplate the gardens of the residential complex. In the distance, I could see other residents doing their morning exercises, tending to plants, or simply enjoying the tranquility. We were all seniors who had decided to live our final years with dignity and independence. "Good morning, Margaret. greeted my neighbor Nora, a 72-year-old woman who had become my best friend. "Ready for our dance class today?" I smiled, remembering how I had started taking dance classes at 67, something I never thought I would do. "More than ready, Nora. These old bones still have a lot to give." During this year, I had discovered a version of myself that had been dormant for decades. Without the constant pressure to please Grace, without the stress of walking on eggshells in my own house, I had blossomed like a flower that finally receives sunlight. I had enrolled in painting classes and discovered that I had a natural talent for landscapes. My paintings now decorated the walls of my apartment, and I had sold some at the local art fair. Ms. Baker, the fair organizer, had told me, "Your paintings convey a peace and wisdom that touches people's hearts." I had also joined the volunteer group at the Golden Hope Foundation, the same organization that would be the beneficiary of my inheritance. I worked 3 days a week, helping other seniors who had been abandoned or mistreated by their families. Margaret, Ms. Carmen, an 81-year-old woman who had come to the foundation after her children had evicted her from her house, told me, "You understand our pain because you lived it firsthand." At the foundation, I had become a kind of unofficial counselor. People who arrived broken and hopeless found in my story an example that it was possible to recover, that it was possible to rebuild a dignified life after the most profound family betrayal. Ms. Margaret, Mr. Robert, a 75-year-old man whose children had emptied his bank accounts, told me, "How did you manage to forgive and move on?" I had replied, "Mr. Robert, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or allowing them to hurt us again. Forgiving means freeing our heart from the poison of resentment so we can live in peace. But living in peace also means moving away from those who hurt us, even if they share our blood." My work at the foundation had given me a purpose I never thought I would have at this age. We had managed to help 47 seniors recover money stolen by their families. 23 had managed to reverse fraudulent documents that declared them incompetent, and 15 had found new, safe homes after being evicted by their own children. But the most important thing I had discovered was my own self-worth. For 66 years, I had measured my value by how much I could give to others, how much I could sacrifice, how much pain I could endure in silence. Now I understood that my value as a person did not depend on being useful to others, but on being true to myself and respecting my own boundaries. As for Grace and Richard, I occasionally received news of them through mutual acquaintances. They had had to move to a smaller, more economical apartment. Richard had definitely lost his opportunities for promotion and now worked at a lower-paying job. Grace had to accept an additional part-time job to be able to pay off all their debts. But what I was told most was that their marriage was in crisis. When they no longer had the mother-in-law's house as a backup plan, they started blaming each other for the failure of their plan, Ms. Rose, my old neighbor, told me. They are constantly fighting over who was to blame for everything being discovered. Interestingly, this didn't give me a vengeful satisfaction, but a deep sadness for the decisions they had made. They had destroyed not only their relationship with me, but also their own relationship with each other. Greed had been a poison that had contaminated everything it touched. 6 months ago, I had received a letter from Grace. I hadn't opened it immediately. It had taken me 3 days to decide if I wanted to read what she had to say to me. Finally, I had opened it in the presence of Nora, my neighbor, to have emotional support. "Dear Mom," the letter began, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I need you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret what I did to you. I've been going to therapy, and now I understand that my actions were unforgivable. I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness or to be back in your life. I just want you to know that I finally understand the harm I caused you." The letter continued. "The therapist helped me understand that my actions were not born of financial desperation, but of a selfish mindset that I had developed over the years. I got so used to receiving your unconditional help that I stopped seeing you as a person with rights and feelings and started seeing you as a resource that I could exploit. Now I understand that you deserved respect, genuine affection, and care in your golden years. Instead, I gave you manipulation, lies, and betrayal. I have lost the best mother in the world because of my own greed and stupidity." The letter ended with a phrase that made me cry. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Mom, because I know I don't deserve it. I just hope you are happy and that you find the peace you always deserved. With love and eternal regret, Grace." That letter had taken me weeks to process emotionally. On one hand, I was happy to know that Grace finally understood the magnitude of what she had done. On the other hand, it was already too late to rebuild our relationship. Some wounds, even if they can heal, leave scars that are too deep to allow things to go back to how they were before. I had responded with a brief but honest letter. "Grace, I accept your apology, and I'm glad to know you're seeking professional help. I forgive you because holding a grudge would harm me, but forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean I can trust you again. I wish you the best in your life, but my life is now at peace without you. With affection, but without a way back, your mother." On the quiet nights in my new home, I often reflected on the lessons this experience had taught me. The most important was that true love never seeks to destroy or appropriate the loved one. True love respects, protects, and seeks the well-being of the other without expecting anything in return. I had also learned that setting boundaries is not cruelty, but emotional survival. For decades, I had confused extreme sacrifice with maternal love, when in reality, I had been teaching Grace that she could mistreat me without consequences. Sometimes, I had told the women in the Foundation support group, the greatest inheritance we can leave our children is not money or property, but the example that all people, including their mothers, deserve respect and dignity. That spring morning, as I finished my coffee on the balcony, I received a call from Attorney Ford. "Ms. Baker, I have some news that might interest you. I've just been contacted because 3 other cases similar to yours have come to light. The affected families want you to share your experience on how to deal with these kinds of situations." "Of course, Attorney," I replied without hesitation. "If my story can help other people defend themselves, I am completely willing to share it." That afternoon, as I painted a mountain landscape on my easel, I reflected on the incredible journey I had been on for the past 18 months. I had started as a silent victim and had become an empowered survivor who now helped others find their own strength. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Nora inviting me to dinner at the new restaurant downtown. "Margaret, let's go celebrate life," she said with her contagious enthusiasm. As I got ready to go out, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a completely different woman from the one I had been a year and a half ago. My eyes shone with a confidence I had never had before. My posture was upright and proud, and my smile was genuine and free of emotional burdens. "Margaret," I said to myself in the mirror, "at 67 years old, you finally learned that your life belongs only to you and that you deserve to live it with dignity, joy, and peace." That night, having dinner with my new chosen family instead of my toxic biological family, we toasted to new beginnings.